there. And last but not least, highlight COP26 as well as some key initiatives that were advanced or launched at COP, as well as detail some next steps. Oh. Sorry about that. Technical difficulty. Okay, so you all should be seeing a quote here, which is a quote from Secretary Vilsack, which I think very much so both details sort of the opportunity at hand, as well as our broad approach here that we'll dive into a little bit more here. The USDA has never been more attuned to the nexus between agricultural production, trade, climate change, and sustainability. To help ensure our efforts in these arenas are mutually reinforcing, we will continue to prioritize innovation and science-based data-driven decision-making. This is obviously a very, there's a lot into this statement, but the mutually reinforcing piece stands out to me as we view co-benefits and looking at things as an and as opposed to an or with regards to encapsulating the opportunities with climate change. So looking at the USDA priorities, our work on climate change is most importantly focused on partnership. I think it's been very impressive with the outreach that we have thus far, in recognizing that it's going to take not just the whole of government approach, but a whole of industry approach in tackling the climate change effort. And this stems throughout the cooperator network, certainly, but with forestry and tribes, with businesses and community. Any policy or decision that's being made or that's going to be made will certainly rely heavily on input from the input from others, as well as partnerships. Volunteering and incentive based, using a carrot as opposed to a stick. We're looking at strengthening existing programs as well as offering new programs. Looking at focusing on creating new opportunities and markets for agriculture and forestry. So focusing on new market opportunities and making sure that if and when the market shifts towards rewarding climate change agricultural products, that we're in a position to take best advantage of those. Certainly want to make sure that rural America benefits from this. As policies certainly come down and as we continue to advance the agenda, making sure that rural America is going to benefit from those, and as well as underarching, making sure that anything that comes down is equitable across all folks within the channel. And last but certainly not least, farmer, rancher, and landowner led. Again, going back to stakeholder engagement, making sure that the policies are going to work for farmers and that has a lot of input from farmers. I want to talk a little bit about the 90-day report. 90-day report was released back in spring, and it's guiding a lot of the policy on the mitigation side that we have thus far. And out of that are 7 recommended elements. I won't go through all of these, but I do want to touch on a few of them here as it relates to both strengthening education, training, and technical assistance. So looking at capacity building, certainly in tech transfer and expanding into new markets. And also want to speak to the importance that we are, again, stakeholder engagement. The Climate Smart Partnership Program is a very important program that was announced back in September. And what this is looking to do is we have new policies and new opportunities to connect these policies and these practices to the end user. This is really an opportunity to receive funding to both incentivize and implement climate smart conservation practices, but also to quantify and monitor the carbon and greenhouse gas benefits associated with these practices. And the request for information on this just ended a couple of weeks ago. We are very pleased with the results and the comments that we received throughout the cooperator community. I think there were almost 400 total comments, and a large portion of those came from the cooperator network, recognizing that this is going to be a very, very important opportunity going forward as we look to strengthen implementation, as well as the ability to measure the impacts of the practices coming through climate smart agriculture and forestry strategies. So Administrator Whitley touched on most of these points, so I won't go through all of them, but I would like to highlight, the 6 that you see here, demonstrating our leadership. As we look at this, we want to demonstrate our leadership in bilateral, multilateral engagements. And what was talked about earlier, I think, is very important. It's the strength of our example. And we are doing a lot of great work. I know I've met with a few of you and heard the great work that you're doing surrounding sustainability. I know that we're going to hear from Brian later today on some things that's happening in cotton. So I think that there's a lot of good examples that we can incorporate as we're demonstrating our leadership. I'm going to talk more about raising global ambition, talk more in detail about the initiatives that have been launched in advance. Aim for C, the Spg Coalition, Global Methane Pledge, all important in demonstrating our leadership as well as raising ambition and driving action. Education and outreach. We want to supplement the administration and USDA's focus on climate literacy by offering additional training and resources geared towards global and trade impacts from climate smart agriculture and forestry practice policies. And last but not least, certainly, we want to maintain and expand market access. But connecting that down a little bit deeper, how FAS core missions aligns with the climate objectives. So in trade policy, we want to work with foreign governments, but we want to make sure that the climate policies that we create won't create larger impact than the problems that they're trying to address. So making sure that that there are benefits in implementing climate smart agriculture and forestry practices. In marketing, certainly most relevant to this group, assisting cooperators and showcasing the sustainability and climate friendly nature of their products. So recognizing that, again, there's a lot of great work being done, and we certainly want to be connected to that and championing that where we can. On the reporting side of things, recognizing that there's a lot of information gathering that's going to need to take place. And we want to make sure that climate change foreign regulatory initiatives aren't disfavoring US agricultural products. So we want to incorporate that climate projections into commodity forecasts. And last but certainly not least, capacity building. Working with host governments to improve SPS systems, which could in some cases further strain the increased animal and plant diseases, due to things such as warming temperatures. So I'll now give a quick overview of COP26 here that just concluded here last week officially, and the week before that for Secretary Vilsack's time there. But there are some key themes here I want to highlight. Most importantly, I'll say that's not listed here is that we are leading the global charge. I think that was on full display a couple of weeks ago as it relates to the initiatives that we launched, certainly the attention and the response that we received from partners. Also, that agriculture has an important role to play in tackling the climate crisis. We certainly recognize that there are different paths to reaching the same goal. And this was, again, recognized through the CPA that you see down there, the collaborative platform on agriculture arrangement with the EU. So recognizing that where there are differences, there's a lot that we can work on together towards reaching the goal of tackling climate change. Innovation is key. This has been something that was, I would say most prominent in Aim for C, but certainly consistent throughout all of our messaging as we continue to look for co-benefits in increasing productivity and addressing climate change and conservation. Agriculture is a part of the solution. Certainly is something that we've talked about, as well as achieving productivity growth sustainably rather than by focusing on limiting consumption. And as Administrator Whitley commented earlier, this is something that we're positioning not intently, but that aligns almost in contrast to agroecology. However, we think it really promotes a great opportunity, and that we can do both at the same time here. Key initiatives that I'll talk about: Aim for C. Aim for C was launched by President Biden. I'll get to that here in a little bit. The CPA agricultural agreement with the EU, the Climate Smart Agricultural Partnership Initiative, which I mentioned earlier, as well as Pathways to Net Dairy Zero, which was another major initiative that both the USDA and USAID signed on, along with our partners in the dairy industry, working towards achieving net zero. So talking about Aim for C, the Ag Innovation Mission for Climate, this has been incredibly impressive with what's been accomplished in a very short period of time. This was initially announced at President Biden's Leaders Summit on Climate back in back in April. In a very short period of time, we've built a coalition and announced a coalition by President Biden of over 80 partners, including 33 government partners, but also a very large number of, doing quick math there, over 47 non-government partners, who are also involved in this in innovation as innovation sprint partners and knowledge partners, which I'll detail here in a bit. But all in all, already we've announced an increase in $4 billion in investment in innovation to support climate smart agriculture and food systems, which is a huge number. When you think about the gap that agriculture needs, and we talk about co-benefits and increasing productivity, as well as being conserving natural resources, it's going to take innovation. And there's a gap right now, some estimates between $6 and $10 billion in ag innovation. And this is working directly to achieve that. In innovation sprint partners, this is the private sector, so the non-government partner portion of AIM4C, or one of them, I should say. And it also includes a financial increase in investment. So innovation sprint partner looks to increase aggregate investment in pursuit of an outcome or output in ag innovation or climate smart agriculture and food system. And it also includes being completed by a specific period of time. I'll highlight that in a short period of time, it's hard to cover this in detail, but there are a number of these on the AIM4C website, so aimforclimate.org. I encourage you all to take a look at those in detail, but I would like to highlight one, which is an initiative to accelerate access and uptake of climate smart crop protection innovations for smallholder farmers in Asia, Africa, and Central America. And climate proofing, another is climate proofing 0.5 billion acres around the world by 2024. And there's also the Greener Cattle initiative. So just, 3 quick ones there, very broadly covered. But, this initiative has really done a great job thus far in garnering interest in bringing both public and non-public partners to the table. And we look forward to continuing to expand this going forward. Also want to note that as we work towards COP27, President Biden put a pretty aggressive goal out there, which is doubling the investment. So doubling that $4 billion to $8 billion by COP27. So we look forward to continuing working towards that. Last but certainly not least, I want to highlight the Spg Coalition. So Sustainable Productivity Growth Coalition that came out of the Food System Summit, which is a coalition focused on both increasing both on productivity growth while achieving adaptation and mitigation co-benefits. And already this initiative these numbers are a little dated in a short period of time, as I found out yesterday, that we're now totaling almost 80 non-government and government partners with this. So there's been an increase in both the non-government partners as well as the government partners, a number of which are cooperators who are likely on this call. So the Spg Coalition is open to members from all sectors, and we certainly welcome continued discussion and engagement as we look to really build a broad group here. And I will flag that there is a meeting for partners on November 22nd taking place. So with that, I've hit my time, and I want to stop here and hand it back over to you, Ross. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy. Great presentation. And so I have a few slides that I was going to go through. When Lorena asked me to do the moderation, I thought that I would only have to be a moderator. And then she said, oh no, but you need to present as well. So I do have a little bit to talk about for our sustainability program. However, in the interest of time, to make sure that we can get to Brian as well as Rod, I'm going to cover it at a very high level. However, all of the slides will be available to everyone, and would be happy to have a deeper conversation with you about what we've done. So wanted to just kick it off here. We've been talking a lot about carbon. That's kind of the new buzzword in sustainability and in agricultural production. So we've done some research to try and get our arms around what the carbon footprint of soy looks like. So this first slide is carbon footprint of production of soy across many different countries, as you can see. Now the next slide is the one that is where we're getting all the attention. So you can see that when you bring in land use change, the picture changes quite dramatically. And so when you look at the US compared to our competitors of Argentina and Brazil, our primary American competitors, and then also bring in some of the European producers, the US has a fabulous story to tell on sustainability. And so this is something we're really trying to highlight, particularly as we see carbon pledges, and we're seeing more and more movement in order to try and demonstrate throughout the entire value chain what the carbon footprint is. And also bear in mind that all of these numbers include the transport to market as well as the processing. So it's not just the cultivation part. It includes everything being, this is for soybeans being delivered to the European market. So even within Europe, we still have a better carbon footprint when you take our transport and everything else to get the soybeans to Europe versus what they can produce in Europe. So about 10 years ago, we started getting questions. It was very much a market access issue or becoming a market access issue. And so we took that opportunity to really evaluate and look introspectively as to what sustainability meant to our farmers and what sustainability meant to the US soy industry. And when we did that, we started to realize that the US system by itself, when you start looking at all the regulations, you start looking at all of the voluntary practices that our sector uses, we had a great story to tell. And what we needed to do is get it documented. So when we did that, we put together the Soy Sustainability Assurance Protocol. It's an aggregate mass balance approach. It covers the entire nation of soy production. So it's not something that's one of the commercial schemes that may only be for a specific country. It covers all of US soy. It does have third-party audits and certification tool. And importantly, we have continuous improvement goals, and there are 4 goals. They are focused on land use, soil conservation, greenhouse gas emissions, and energy use. So that's something that we've been able to demonstrate to the industry that we are committed to sustainability. And I'm going to end with this slide so that we can move on to Brian. But some of the key achievements that we've had for the Soy Sustainability Assurance Protocol is that we've been positively benchmarked by the European Feed Manufacturers Association. They have a third party do that benchmarking, which is the International Trade Center at the WTO. So that's actually, there's a website there that you can go to and you can look at all the various schemes that have been positively benchmarked have been benchmarked by them versus various sourcing guidelines. So we had that recognition in 2015 against those guidelines, and then they just issued new guidelines in 2021. And just last week, we received that accreditation. Also been recognized by the Consumer Goods Forum as meeting some of their sustainability sourcing. The Tokyo Olympic Procurement Committee, we're part of the Global Seafood Alliance's best aquaculture practices as meeting their feed standards. And we have recognition under the European Union's Renewable Energy Directive. So these are some pretty key achievements for the US soy industry, and we're quite proud of them. We continue to work on different things. We've mapped to the Sustainable Development Goals. So again, that kind of helps us have that international conversation, since SDGs are the international nomenclature for sustainability. We're part of the SPG that Jeremy was talking about. So we've been quite active in the food system summit, among other things. And then also we're part of the GBI, the US Sustainability Alliance, that has over 20 cooperators coming together to talk about sustainability. So with that, Ray, if we can go ahead and go straight to Brian's slides, want to turn it over to him so that we can hear from the cotton industry as to how they've addressed some of the concerns that they've been facing from their international markets.
Great, yeah, thank you, Ross. My name is Brian Wiggins. I'm the Director of Market Research and Evaluation at Cotton Council International. I'm going to be talking about our U.S. Cotton Trust Protocol. So this is our cotton sustainability program that we've been rolling out over the past year and a half. And there we go. So why do we create the program? Well, we found over the past about 4 or 5 years, most of the major global brands and retailers started creating lists of sustainable fibers. And they made pledges that by 2025, somewhere 2030, that they would only source from these lists of sustainable fibers. The problem was US cotton was not on many of the lists. And that's not because we're not sustainable. We believe we're the most sustainably grown cotton in the world. But that's based on our US government laws and regulations. But the brands and retailers really didn't want to take our word for it. So what they really wanted was a third-party verification. So they wanted something they could check the box and say, this is sustainable. On top of that, on top of the brands and retailers, we also started running into some government regulations. So the German government in 2014 created this German Partnership for Sustainable Textiles. It governs all the major German brands such as Hugo Boss, Adidas, Puma, and they created their own list of sustainable fibers. And again, we weren't on that list either. So the concern with that one was that that list could move from Germany throughout the rest of Europe and the UK. And if we get barred from all of the European brands and retailers, would be in big trouble. So we started with the sustainability program, and it's really expanded into a sustainability and transparency program over the past year. And this really came about because of the allegations of forced labor in the Xinjiang region of China. As many of you know, US Customs and Border Protection is really restricting imports of any products coming from the Xinjiang region. And most of their cotton, in fact, in China is grown in that region. So it's really caused a big problem for brands and retailers. They've had to take a much closer look at their supply chain than they had in the past. Many of these brands and retailers, to be honest, when we had asked them in the past where their cotton came from, they didn't know. Now they really have to. And it's really provided an opportunity for US cotton, but we need that transparency. So that's something I will discuss here in a minute. Let me talk about the trust protocol now. So this is a U.S. cotton industry initiative. It was led by the National Cotton Council, which is our parent organization. But it really was a true collaboration across the industry. A lot of folks have worked very hard to make this happen. And what it does, it provides the brands and retailers with that third-party verification that they were looking for. At the same time, providing transparency into their supply chain to avoid some of the social issues around forced labor and things like that nature. For producers, it's a voluntary program. They complete 116 question self-assessment based on 9 core principles of sustainability. And for them, they're able to track their progress over time as well as against their peers. So the idea is really continuous improvement. We want to see a reduction in our environmental footprint over time. For the producers, though, also that measurement against their peers provides also kind of a look into their own systems. If they're using more water, if they're using more fertilizer than their peers, that's not only an environmental issue for them, that really impacts their bottom line. So we're hoping that as we reduce our environmental footprints, that it also save producers money. It's really a win-win for them. And then the third-party verification is conducted by a company called Control Union. Some of the questionnaire topics include soil health, nutrient management, water management, crop protection, harvest preparation, biodiversity, fiber quality, data management, traceability, farm management, and worker well-being. So as you can see, it's a pretty robust set of questions. As I mentioned, it's 116 questions. So we do have a lot of data. So that's the good news here. So this is the field print calculator from field to market. So this is Rod's old stomping grounds. And this really shows over time the reduction in our environmental footprint across a multitude of dimensions. This next slide, you can see the US cotton goals for environmental goals. So for 2025, our goals are to increase land use efficiency by 13%, reduce soil loss by 50%, reduce water usage by 18%, increase soil carbon by 30%, reduce greenhouse gases by 39%, and decrease energy use by 15%. So while these are industry-wide goals, we think with all the data we're collecting in the trust protocol, it'll really help us to achieve these goals. So the membership. In 2020, this past year, we had 1.5 million bales in the protocol. So that was about 10% of the crop. We expect to double that in 2021 up to 3 million bales with a target of 50% of cotton by 2025 in the program. We've had over 450 brands, retailers, mills, and manufacturers join the trust protocol already from across 20 countries. And really the one I want to point out was the brands and retailers. So in the past, before this program, we had reached out to sustainability officers and folks of that level. And they weren't returning our calls, they weren't returning our emails. We had a tough time getting in touch with these folks. And that's changed completely since we rolled out this trust protocol. We've had conversations with every one of the top 100 global brands and retailers. Many of them have already joined the trust protocol, which is great. Some of them have joined but don't want to announce it yet just because of the issues with the supply chain in China. It's a very touchy subject right now. But some of the ones I can announce are Gap, Old Navy, Banana Republic, Levi's, Dockers, PVH. And I expect quite a few more over the next year. And as I mentioned at the beginning, the brands and retailers had these lists of sustainable fibers. And many of these came from organizations such as Textile Exchange. It's a nonprofit in the sustainability sector. We were added to their list of sustainable fibers now with our trust protocol. Same with the Cotton 2040 initiative. So most of these large brands and retailers, they didn't actually have their own lists. They rely on these lists from some of the nonprofits and NGOs. And the fact that that door was closing on us just a couple of years ago, really reopening now, and that's been great to see. We're hoping to gain acceptance by the German partnership early in the next year. Just a couple more slides here. As I mentioned earlier, transparency has become a much more important topic over the past year. And so that's led us to this partnership with Textile Genesis. They are a organization that's been involved in this space, and a lot of large global brands and retailers are starting to join Textile Genesis. So it's been a great partnership for us. And I'll show you how it works on the next slide. So with the trust protocol, all of the producers sign up through our protocol. We capture all the data through our system, and brands and retailers claim trust protocol through our system. But then as it moves through the supply chain from the mills and manufacturers up to brands and retailers, that's all captured by Textile Genesis. So really a robust system that allows brands and retailers to have a much closer look at their supply chain and really see how that cotton is moving throughout the supply chain, and have a much better picture of what's going on. So, and I do have one summary slide here at the end, but I think I've touched on most of this. So in the interest of time, since we're running low here, I will pass it back to I guess Rod.
Thank you, Brian. I think cotton, it's been very fascinating and interesting to watch what you all have been able to develop and how you've been able to keep your access to the marketplace. So congratulations to you all for that. Now it's my pleasure to welcome Rod Snyder to the floor. And so Rod, I won't tell them how long we've known one another because it goes back to corn days when we both were corn staff. But we're certainly happy to welcome you here in your new role at EPA and look forward to hearing some of your insights.
Thanks so much, Roz. I appreciate being included on this panel, and just a few sort of introductory comments. Rod Snyder, I'm the new agriculture advisor to the administrator of the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. I've been in this role for exactly 1 month. Prior to that, I was actually working as president of Field to Market, which Brian mentioned a moment ago, a private sector supply chain sustainability initiative across U.S. commodity crop production, and then have had some other roles within the ag sector over the years. I say all that to say the title of this panel is around public and private sector priorities. Now that I am on the government side and in the public sector, it continues to be encouraging to see private sector leadership, including the last couple of presentations, the initiative that's being taken from farm groups and others within the private sector to really advance climate goals and strategies across the US. In my role here at US EPA, I'm helping to advise Administrator Michael Regan on agricultural policy that touches all facets of the US EPA. We're working on things like water, pesticides, clean air, climate and energy issues on a daily basis. I think Jeremy, in his remarks regarding USDA's role, made a lot of important points that I don't need to repeat, except for to say that President Biden and this administration has certainly made climate a really key priority, one of the very top priorities, I think, of this administration. And that was certainly demonstrated in President Biden's attendance and remarks at COP26 earlier this month in Glasgow, Scotland. And I think 10 members of the cabinet, including Administrator Michael Regan, were in attendance to really signify the US rejoining the Paris Accord and really trying to be again at the forefront of the global climate conversation. As part of that, I believe you'll hear many members of the administration, including the president, looking to and talking about natural climate solutions, including agriculture, as a key solution to help us get to our goals over the next several decades of reducing greenhouse gas emissions, sequestering carbon, et cetera. And that certainly includes ag and forestry, it certainly includes soil carbon sequestration and soil management. It also looks at a variety of emissions reduction opportunities and strategies across US agriculture. Just as importantly, I think EPA is also looking at climate adaptation and resiliency. And just last month, Administrator Regan released a climate adaptation action plan, thinking about how many sectors across the US economy need to think about what are the potential impacts from climate change that we all need to be thinking ahead and looking about the implications for our economy and for different segments, including food and ag production. We know that there are a lot of risks to the agricultural sector around climate change. We've seen them in recent years in terms of more frequent extreme weather events. All of that is going to take science and technology and innovation to ensure that our growers can withstand the changing climate and also to be able to produce food for a growing global population. President Biden has talked about a whole of government approach. It's not just EPA or just USDA. It's all federal agencies rowing in the same direction. And there's a couple of programs that I just want to quickly mention. I know we're short on time here, but from the EPA perspective, a couple places where I believe that we have some specific opportunities and where we've been helping to lead. We've been partnering with USDA on the Ag Star program within the animal ag sector, specifically looking at increasing the adoption of anaerobic digesters for sustainable manure management, and also as a way to capture methane and reduce methane emissions from the livestock sector through voluntary initiatives. That's not a regulatory program, it's a voluntary program that EPA and USDA work on together with livestock producers across the United States through providing training and technical assistance. We also have a biogas toolkit that we've published to help the sector begin to look at these opportunities around methane capture. And that's, I think, a key one within our agency. Also, the renewable fuel standard is an important tool as we're looking at continuing to transition to a clean energy future. Liquid biofuels continue to be part of that equation, including lower carbon footprint of our transportation fuels. The RFS is a program that is largely driven within EPA, within our Office of Air, and continues to be, I think, a key priority for Administrator Regan going forward as also a climate strategy as well. And underlying, I think, all of this, as Jeremy and others have mentioned, is really looking at science-based solutions. EPA wants to ensure that that all of our policies, protocols, regulations, and decision-making are really rooted in strong science, and that we continue to advance some of the best science in the world when it comes to these programmatic decisions around climate change and otherwise. So really just here today to say that EPA is and can be an even greater partner, I think, in this effort to adopt climate smart agricultural practices across the country. I believe that there's a renewed commitment within the agency, within this administration, to provide leadership on a global scale. And I think there'll be a lot of benefits in these partnerships between the public and private sectors, and also between agencies like EPA and USDA really excited to be in this role as Ag Advisor and also want to be a resource as these programs and initiatives move forward. So I know we're already past the 5 o'clock hour, so Roz, I'll hand it back over to you, and assuming we'll have time for a little bit, maybe some questions.
Thanks, Rod. And I think it's really, in many ways, reassuring for us to hear kind of the approach that's being taken and to understand a little bit more completely about how all of this is integrating together. So I would invite Jeremy and Brian to also turn on their cameras. And please, if anybody has any questions, drop them in the chat. And we will try and get to them. And thank you for the high number of you that have stuck with us even a little bit past the hour. I think one of the themes that we certainly heard throughout the presentations was how we need to look at agriculture as a system. And I think that that's both what cotton has done and what the soy industry has done, is when we're looking at it, we look at it holistically. So when Rod, some of your comments, we're also leaning towards that, looking at it as a system. You can't only look at active substances, substance by substance, or a certain technology. You can't just look at maybe utilizing methane digesters. It has to be a holistic approach. Is there anything more you could add to that? And then Jeremy, as a heads up, I'm going to toss that to you too, because I think the SPG and the Aim for Climate all kind of talk about that systemic approach as well.
Well, I would say quickly, Roz, that farmers don't have the luxury of just managing for one particular outcome. So there's not a grower or producer in the United States that's only thinking about greenhouse gas emissions, for example. So there are soil and climate and biodiversity and productivity concerns. And I think the federal government and the role that we play also has to balance all of these same considerations and do that in a science-based way. And so when we're looking at the climate crisis and the impacts on agriculture and the opportunities for ag to be a solution, that cuts across a lot of different types of metrics and indicators. It certainly includes water use and water quality. It includes practices that have multiple co-benefits. If you look at things like cover crops and reducing tillage, there are many benefits to that from an environmental and conservation perspective. And I think the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency has to keep all of those things in mind, and I believe that we do, as we're looking at various policies and protocols that we're putting in place to advance climate smart ag.
Thank you, Rod. And Jeremy, do you have anything to add from FAS's perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. The one thing I'll add, and I think Rod answered it well, is that there's a true opportunity, I think, from an innovation perspective to advance the approach to food system and offering solutions. Again, referencing Aim for C, it's not just climate smart agriculture. It's also looking at food system and recognizing the holistic approach and the real opportunity that exists there, and incorporating the entire food system into that conversation. I think that's also reflected by the number of organizations and NGOs that have signed on an Aim for C outside of the general scope that you would think of when just simply production ag, but expanding that a bit.
Great, thank you. So Brian, there's a question to you and I, and so I'll make you answer it first. The question is, how long did it take to develop the protocols? So for you, your cotton protocol. And what were the initial steps taken to develop it with input from the farmers?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a long process. And I meant to mention this is not easy. It took a lot of effort from across the industry, and I would say I think we're still finalizing some of the finer details. But we started probably 2 years ago, at least. It may have been even before that, with some of the talks of going on. But I would say the hardcore work probably started about 2 years ago. Rolled it out about 1.5 years ago, but it's still in process. And I think we started with some committees and kind of conversations and focusing on the big picture and getting the producers signed up. But it's really sort of been a balancing act of signing up producers to make sure we have enough cotton in the program, and then the end users, the brands and retailers, trying to get them on board, because trying to balance that supply and demand, we don't really want to tilt too far in either direction. So that's been one of the biggest challenges, I think, for us.
Yeah, well, and I would say that it probably took us about 2 years to really get ours put together. And, you know, when we were talking about this 10 years ago, sustainability was a really scary thing for many people, and particularly for farmers, because it was almost perceived that that would end up being regulation or a requirement. And so we had to balance those conversations. And certainly it was before my time at USAC that I happened to be in a partner organization at the time. There was a little bit of skepticism, I would say, and some apprehension. But in order to do it, we brought together the entire value chain, much like cotton did, including exporters and retailers and importers and feed industry and farm organizations, NGOs. So we kind of developed it in that multi-stakeholder approach, and that really helped us then be able to deliver it and have some confidence behind it, because we had done such a thorough job. And then, as Brian said, it's ever evolving. We talk about, you know, it's a journey. It is not a destination. And we talk about continuous improvement in agriculture and how we need to continually be better at what we do. We need to be more efficient, reduce our environmental footprint, be more socially responsible, and remain economically viable. And so these protocols are also continuous improvement, because we're constantly looking at what the new opportunities are, but also what the new challenges are that we need to be able to demonstrate that we are addressing. When we went through the most recent FEFAC benchmarking, we did a pretty comprehensive update of our protocol, and in order to be able to prove conversion free and a number of different things. And so we're constantly having to look at that as the demands being placed upon the industry are changing throughout the world. We have to see what we're able to meet, and then have those tough conversations on things that just may not make the most sense. So it never ends. So it took about 2 years to get something on paper and get something recognized, but then it never ends. It's constantly, almost a daily review of what's going on with sustainability. Well, I know we are now 10 minutes over. It's 5 o'clock. So I really appreciate the discussion that we've had. I apologize that we haven't had more of a Q&A session, but again, I think that all of our contact information is available, so please reach out to us, and we're happy to answer any questions. But thank you to the panelists for joining, and I will let each of you have a final word. So let's go in reverse order this time. Rod, final words.
Just thank everyone on the call from both the public and private sectors for their commitment to these issues. I agree with Jeremy's very beginning comment, which is there has never been more focus, I think, on climate and the intersection with food and ag. And it's an exciting time to be working on these issues, and it's going to take both the public and private sector working together to make progress. So just a note of appreciation.
Thank you, Rod. Brian?
And I'll say thank you to everyone for coming, participating in this session. If you have any questions or follow-ups about what we've done, I'm happy to answer those offline. I know it was a long process, and there are a lot of people to thank in our industry, because it's been a lot of hard work for, I think, pretty much everyone in our industry has had a hand in this. So it was not something we could do alone, and we're still kind of trying to recruit some of the farmers to sign up and be a part of this, but they're definitely more enthusiastic of this program than they would be from some kind of external program, run by European NGOs or something like that. So I think we've come a long way, but we have a long way to go. So, thank you.
Thank you. And Jeremy?
No, thanks, Roz, and thanks, Rod and Brian, as well. This has been a really, really great informational session here. I guess what I'll say is that going back to the opportunity you have to really lead by example and to display what's already happening largely. I think there's so much we can pull from this group. We heard from Roz and what the soybean industry is doing, and we heard from Brian and what cotton's doing, but there's so many more great stories and opportunities to explore here. So I would implore you all here, as we continue to build on this example and putting American agriculture on full display in the world, is where we continue to lead by example here. here. So again, thank you all very much. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm more than happy to answer them. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you all, and thank you all for the comments. So with that, we will go ahead and declare this year's USAEDC concluded with this panel conclusion. So thank you again for joining us and hanging in for an extra 15 minutes. Appreciate it.